Welcome back to our BBC election coverage here on the BBC News Channel with me here in London and Kirsty in Edinburgh. And Kirsty, we are awaiting that formal statement now from the First Minister.
We are indeed, but before we get to there, we must reflect on the fact that it was kind of Super Thursday, wasn't it? And we've had an extraordinary couple of days with three massive political stories. The story in Wales, Mark Drakeford embedding himself, a great Labour leader for Labour people and all of Wales. In fact, we've had the problems in the Red Wall for Labour in a different set of circumstances, and we have had the return of the SNP for a fourth term in the Scottish Parliament. Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland, likely to be there for a decade. These are three very huge building blocks in British politics.
Yes, and they're so distinct and they're so distinctive, Kirsty, really, because we're now looking at a Britain, not a UK, because there are no elections in Northern Ireland, a Scotland and England and a Wales, which look very different politically. As you say, Labour holding on to power very firmly in Wales. At the end of this term, they'll have been in power for nearly 26 years. The SNP, as you say, firmly in power in Scotland, and then a very different-looking England with some pockets of Labour support, of course, in Greater Manchester and other areas, but a very blue map for England. So three very different identities there.
Now let's just look at where we are for the state of the parties in Scotland in the Parliament. And we can see there now, overall, SNP 62 seats, that's +3. Conservatives 12, that's -1. Labour on 6, -3, not a good 2 days for Labour. Liberal Democrats stay at the same position of 4. But look there, the Greens putting on 1 list seat. But of course, that's only 86 out of 129. And we've got 44 to go on the list. And so at least by tomorrow afternoon, at the very latest, we'll be clear what the exact picture in Scotland is. But we pretty well know that the SNP and the Greens together provide a majority for independence for Scotland. And it's how we see that prosecuted over the next 4 weeks and months, which is going to be fascinating. There we have it. We can see the platform there ready for Nicola Sturgeon. She is in Glasgow, and again, as we said earlier, Scotland's choice. She's making it very clear. This is not the SNP's choice. It's not even SNP voters' choice. This is the choice now for the people of Scotland. That's the way that she wants to characterise it. And that is the way that she will address this when she addresses the issue, not necessarily with Boris Johnson, but to Boris Johnson. I don't know when the two last met.
Well, indeed.
They last met when it was over a vaccine.
Indeed. I'm just wondering, Kirsty, really, the extent to which the First Minister will go into those areas, or whether she will just simply take stock after this election result, just underline what the achievement is from her point of view, and what kind of government she wants to be shaping up. As you said yesterday and today, there are new members of this Scottish Parliament, some of whom are very experienced, and surely they will be part of this team. What kind of message does she want to convey? And then maybe there'll be some hints there about how she wants to tackle the very big question, of course, of the future.
Well, what she'll probably do is a cabinet reshuffle, because she, of course, has Angus Robertson in the frame again, a very senior figure in the SNP. He was the SNP leader at Westminster. He is back in the Scottish Parliament for Edinburgh Central, where we're sitting now. And there is absolutely no doubt that he will get a job in a cabinet reshuffle. So we're going to see not old faces, we're going to see veteran faces in her cabinet, because people like Mike Russell are going. Now, Mike Russell has been a leading figure in the SNP back from the 70s. So we're going to see new faces, and we've certainly got new MSPs, lots of new MSPs, because there were a lot of retirals.
We're being told, Kirsty, that the statement's coming very, very soon. We don't have too long to wait. Just saying to viewers that there's not too long to wait before Nicola Sturgeon appears. And also, John Curtice is with us as well, who's looking on with a great interest, of course, in the makeup here in Scotland. And we may cut across John if Nicola Sturgeon appears, obviously. But just a thought from you on what she will be thinking and reflecting on after this election. We've had the Conservatives already saying, she didn't do what she wanted to do. But let's face it, it's still a pretty stunning and successful result.
Well, I think she faces two immediate challenges. The first is to become the First Minister of Scotland. That is, we've had an election in which it's very clear that Scotland is seriously divided on the constitutional question. But of course, it is a country like the rest of the United Kingdom, indeed like the rest of the world, that still has to sort out how to deal with what is hopefully the tail end of the pandemic, and then to deal with the consequences. And I think we ought to be hearing a speech this evening that enables her to reach across the political divide in order to address those wider concerns that the country has. The second and more narrow consideration is whether or not she can bring back together the nationalist movement, which has suffered quite a lot of bruises from, first of all, the fallout between her and Alex Salmond, her predecessor, and particularly the parliamentary inquiry at which the two of them had to appear to give their side of the story. A story which in the end, of course, then resulted in Alex Salmond standing as a separate Alba party and took a number of SNP activists with him. Now, that project has failed. But now the question is she going to try to hold out the olive branch, try to reunite her party? And how is she going to persuade the potential critics within her party that actually they shouldn't necessarily be trying to push for a referendum sooner rather than later? So I think there's a job to do for her as the First Minister of Scotland. And there's also an important job for her to do as the SNP leader and the person whom you would normally regard as the leader of the wider nationalist movement in Scotland.
Yeah. John, would it be your projection that pro-independence majority were the biggest that we have had in Scotland?
Yes, to be honest, I've not thought of the answer to that question, and I see Nicola Sturgeon is going to come across anyway, but I think the answer is yes.
First entered government back in 2007, we secured just one more seat than the Labour Party. Very few people back then could have predicted that 14 years later, the SNP would be re-elected for a fourth consecutive term as Scotland's government. And absolutely no one would have predicted the scale and the record-breaking nature of our victory at this election. Now, we don't yet have confirmation of the final result, but we do know that on a record turnout, the SNP has won 62 constituency seats, or on course to do that. That is a higher number than ever before, and it would be an incredible 85% of the total. And we haven't just held every constituency seat that we won back in 2016. We've also gained seats from both Labour and the Tories and recorded our best ever share of the constituency vote. Indeed, we have won more votes and a higher share of the votes in the constituency ballot than any party in the history of devolution. This election result is, by any standard, an extraordinary and historic achievement. We took our positive message of hope and recovery to every corner of our country, and it has been endorsed emphatically by the people of Scotland. My heartfelt thanks go to all of those in the SNP who worked so hard in such difficult circumstances to make all of this possible. I also send my warm congratulations to successful candidates from all political parties, and of course my commiserations to those who have lost out. I know from personal experience how tough that is. But most of all, I want to thank the people of Scotland for putting their trust in me and in the SNP once again. We will work to repay that trust every day. Over these past 14 years, the makeup of the Scottish electorate has changed. 16 and 17-year-olds can now vote, and seeing so many of our young people engaged and energised inspires real hope for the future. And in this election, for the very first time, foreign nationals and refugees were able to vote as well, a tangible symbol of the inclusive country that we are. On Thursday morning in my own constituency, I met with Syrian refugees who had just cast their first votes here in Scotland. It was a deeply emotional moment for them, and as a country, that should make us really proud. So my message today really is for all of Scotland, and it is this one. Wherever you are from, whatever age you are, whatever your background, and no matter who you voted for, the SNP in government is dedicated to working for you. I pledge that the task of building a better Scotland for everyone who chooses to live here will be my priority every single day. As First Minister, of course, my immediate and overriding task will be to do everything I possibly can to keep us all as safe as possible. While we are making real and positive progress now, we have not yet beaten COVID. During this campaign, I said that tackling the pandemic must come first for as long as it takes, and I meant that. I will be returning to work straight away to take the decisions that will guide our next steps back to normality and on to recovery. In this election, the SNP put forward an ambitious and transformative programme to kickstart and drive our recovery from this pandemic. So we will now get on with the job of delivering that programme. That means the remobilisation of our NHS, coupled with the investment it needs to secure it for the future. A new national care service, investment to support new green jobs and re-skill people for the future. A youth guarantee to secure opportunities for our young people. Action to tackle the climate emergency and ensure a just transition. More houses, better schools and an unwavering commitment to lifting children out of poverty. The policy programme we put before the people of Scotland will move our country forward and it will make it better. Of that, I have no doubt. But while we are, understandably and rightly, focused this weekend on our own election results here in Scotland, the results of the various contests south of the border reveal and underline an important truth about Scotland and the rest of the UK. The majority of people here in Scotland back a progressive, inclusive, outward-looking vision for the future of our nation. And yet we are facing many more years of right-wing, Brexit-obsessed Tory governments that we don't vote for, taking us in a direction that we have not chosen. That brings into very sharp focus a key question that was posed at this election. How do we best secure the kind of country we want to build? And just as we said in this election, it is why the people of Scotland must have the right to decide our own future when the COVID crisis has passed. This is now a matter of fundamental democratic principle. Already today I hear opposition parties and some commentators talking about what they call SNP demands for an independence referendum. They're desperately trying to rewrite the basic rules of democracy and redefine what constitutes an election win and a mandate. And of course I hear the usual talk of Boris Johnson refusing to give in to those demands and all the supposedly clever manoeuvres that Westminster might be planning. All of this risks treating voters in Scotland and our entire democratic process as if they simply don't matter, like they are just a sideshow. Voters are not a sideshow. It is you, not me, not Boris Johnson, not any politician, but you who are the people who matter. And so let us be clear about what Scotland voted for on Thursday. The people of Scotland have voted to give pro-independence parties a majority in the Scottish Parliament. Now, the final numbers may not yet be known, but it is beyond doubt that the pro-independence majority in our new Parliament will be larger than it was in the last one. Both the SNP and the Scottish Greens stood on a clear commitment to an independence referendum within the next parliamentary term. And both of us made clear that the timing of a referendum should be decided by a simple majority of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament. So in no way can a referendum be described as just a demand of me or of the SNP. It is a commitment made to the people by a clear majority of the MSPs who have been elected to our national Parliament. It is the will of the country. And given that outcome, there is simply no democratic justification whatsoever for Boris Johnson or indeed for anyone else seeking to block the right of the people of Scotland to choose our own future. And let me be very clear about this. If the Tories make such an attempt, they won't be placing themselves in opposition to the SNP. They will be standing in direct opposition to the will of the Scottish people. And they will demonstrate conclusively that the UK is not a partnership of equals, and astonishingly that Westminster no longer sees it as a voluntary union of nations. That in itself would be a most powerful argument for Scotland becoming an independent country. Of course, holding a referendum does not mean that Scotland will automatically become independent. That will be a choice for the people of Scotland. And the task for those of us who support independence is to make that case and to persuade our fellow citizens with patience and with honesty of its merits. That is what the SNP intends to do. So let me set out the task ahead for me and for your re-elected SNP government. First and foremost, it is to lead Scotland through the pandemic and to keep the people of this country as safe as possible. That will be my focus when I return to my desk tomorrow. It is then to kickstart and drive our recovery from COVID with that ambitious and transformative programme for government. And yes, when the crisis has passed, it is to give people in Scotland the right to choose our own future. All of that is what I promised in this election, and all of that is what I intend to deliver. But first, it is time now for me to get back to work to lead this country through and out of the COVID crisis. Thank you so much for the trust you have once again placed in me. I promise to serve all of the people of Scotland with integrity, with energy, and with an unwavering commitment to building the better Scotland that we all know is possible. Thank you.
Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland, with her victory speech. She talks about hope and recovery, and she also says it is about fundamental democratic principle. And our special correspondent, Alan Little, is here straight away to respond to that speech. Alan.
Interesting that she chose to represent the election results in the three nations of Britain in this way, as a divergence of values. The Conservative victory, and equally astonishing success for the Conservatives as they've had for the SNP here. That victory representing the triumph of the values of the Brexit heartland, whereas in Scotland she paints the victory for the SNP as a triumph of what she calls progressive, largely left of centre, liberal values. Now keen for people to think of the two countries as seeking not just different destinies, but contradictory destinies, and then talking about this vital democratic principle, twice mentioning the will of the country and the will of the people. And of course, the will of the people is a phrase that has been very prominent in the British political discourse since 2016, used, of course, by the Brexiteers, accusing the media, the judiciary, the metropolitan elites of trying to thwart the will of the people. So that, she hopes, I think, will resonate in the corridors of Whitehall and Westminster.
I just wanted to talk about Nicola Sturgeon herself, because she did an interview quite recently about her, how she changed as a politician. And she said that more recently she learned to be herself. And there is no doubt that she has absolutely grown into this job. You know, she commands the position. Yeah,
it's interesting. If you compare her to her contemporaries at Westminster, the ones who came straight out of Oxford and Cambridge and largely into special advisor jobs and into safe seats. When a politician, an SNP politician of Nicola Sturgeon's generation, joined the party, you expected to lose elections. You did not join the party to have a career in government. That has happened because of the political changes that have taken place. So Nicola Sturgeon fought, I can't remember how many elections before she won one. So there is a kind of, there's a grittiness to her that many others lack.
But there is one. There are two outcomes, obviously, but the outcome that we absolutely know, well, I imagine that we know, is depending on the outcome of this fight for independence referendum 2 and the result of it, if it comes, there'll be a resignation. It'll either be Nicola Sturgeon, if she doesn't get Indy Ref 2, I imagine, or it'll be Boris Johnson, who doesn't want to be the man who said goodbye to the union. He would have to resign.
holding a referendum soon is a huge risk for Nicola Sturgeon because the argument's not ready. The country's divided more or less 50-50. We haven't heard what the plan is for a border with England. We don't know what the relationship with Europe is.
To be fair, Andrew Wilson said we would hear all that in the arguments.
But the case is yet to be made. Nicola Sturgeon herself said that Andrew Wilson's Growth Commission report is already out of date.
Yeah.
So they've got to build the argument again, and it's not clear that they would win it. And if they lost a second one, that really probably would be it. Equally, the longer Boris Johnson says no, 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 the way Margaret Thatcher did in the 80s, the more potentially support for independence will build until it, because the younger, the further down the age demographic you go, the more fervent support for independence becomes. And so, to some extent, the longer the government in London delays, the more risky it is that when it eventually comes, they'll lose it.
Alan, thanks very much indeed.
Well, there's plenty of food for thought there, isn't there, after the First Minister's address, and indeed the threads being picked up there by Kirsty and by Alan. Vicky is with me. So the question I suppose I'd ask you, Vicky, is with your contacts in Westminster and in government here, what's the response going to be to that?
I mean, this is fascinating because exactly as Alan was saying there, the idea of saying no, no, no has huge, huge pitfalls for Boris Johnson. Of course, he doesn't want to be the Prime Minister who oversees the breakup of the Union. So he doesn't want a referendum anytime soon, neither does Nicola Sturgeon. So the question is, how does the Westminster government, how does he respond to that? Now, he might not even need to say the words no. What one cabinet source said to me is this is about delay, delay, delay. This is about time. They absolutely do not want a repeat of what happened in Catalonia, you know, where police are sent in, arrests are made, all that kind of thing. They want to calm this down. They want this to be calmer. They don't want to escalate it. The problem they've got, though, is exactly that. They will be looking at public opinion. We've heard a lot here about, you know, whether the SNP have a majority, whether they don't. There is a majority, of course, in Holyrood in the Scottish Parliament. But actually, it's public opinion that ministers here will be looking at in Scotland. If it gets up to the point of being 60% in favour of independence, then it becomes a moment where he can't hold off any longer. But they don't feel they're there at this moment, so they will delay this for as long as they can. They know that there are lots and lots of questions that are unanswered about what an independent Scotland would look like, and so they are just going to leave it there at the moment. What's happening here is Nicola Sturgeon and Boris Johnson are both trying to make the other one act. Nicola Sturgeon would like nothing more than Boris Johnson going to the Supreme Court to try and stop what she says is the democratic will of the Scottish people. I'm not sure that he will do that. He knows how it would look.
High stakes. Vicky, thanks very much. Short while ago, we were looking at the result coming in from the West Midlands for the mayor of the big region of the West Midlands, and the victor there, Andy Street, for the Conservatives, has been re-elected. Mr. Street, many congratulations on a very convincing win, and thanks for joining us. People ask about the secrets of success. What have they been for you?
So thank you very much, Huw. So I think it's very simple. The message here across the West Midlands for the Conservatives is we said what we were going to do 4 years ago. We got on and did it. It's been great teamwork with our councils, with our MPs, and people saw that we delivered. And you know what? We laid out a detailed plan on what we were going to do in the next 3 years, and people bought into that today. They wanted a positive vision for the future of this region.
Is it too far today, Mr. Street, to be thinking about having a debate about the way that these devolved powers can work within a region like yours, the kind of powers that you can use? Is this a pattern of governance that can be extended much further within English cities and regions?
So I'm bound to say yes to that, aren't I? I gave my job up running John Lewis in order to come and lead a region. And I think here people would say, actually, yeah, having a mayor, having a sort of working together between the 7 authorities of the region has helped us. So yes, I will be saying to government, we should go further in that. But really, we don't get obsessed by the powers and the process. This is all about, can we deliver for communities? And I really believe that people have turned to the Conservative Party across the West Midlands because they genuinely believe we've done it and we can do more.
So we were listening earlier to a fellow regional mayor of yours, Andy Burnham, in Manchester, and he was talking about, you know, this pattern of governance and the way that you can deliver on certain things. And he mentioned some policies that he now wanted to implement in this second term of his. What are you hoping to achieve then in your second term?
So the big issue coming out of COVID is very clear, Huw. It's about jobs and the economy. I mean, this place really was doing well economically before COVID. Fastest growing area, record employment, but we've had a hit. So the commitment just in the region in 2 years is for 100,000 jobs. We're also utterly determined to continue investing in transport, in housing, improving the qualification level of our teams as well, and then really doing our bit around protecting the environment. But the critical point is we've got the plans, action. We get on with it next week. It's not just sound bites, it's about delivering a strategy.
So, fair enough, it's not about sound bites. Protecting the environment will mean what in practical terms?
It means that here we've got a plan for carbon neutrality by 2041, and it means investing in green public transport, already £1 billion allocated to that. It means making sure that we're building homes in brownfield sites, not ripping up greenbelt. And of course, it means that we're investing in new green industries like the electrification of the automotive industry here.
When this is a theme, isn't it, on transport, which is understandable for people, it's just the lifeblood of so many economies and lots of economic activity. Mr Burnham raised it, Mr Rotherham in Liverpool. So transport in the West Midlands is going to change in what way over the next 5 years?
So it's already changing. We've increased our investment in transport 7-fold over the time I've been mayor, and we will double that again. In practical terms, it means reopening railway lines that were closed by Dr Beeching. It means extending our tram, our metro system by many, many miles, many more stations. It means having the cleanest bus fleet, indeed complete clean fleet by just the end of this year. It means reducing fares, and really excitingly, it also means making sure that we have many more people cycling and walking.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Mr Street, was that, you know, this is a question as well of personalities. In other words, somebody that people can relate to, can identify. That's one of the big advantages of the position that you have, in a way, regardless of party allegiance. This is what's intriguing about these roles. So Mr Burnham readily admitting that there were lots of people voting for him who were not natural Labour supporters. Now, are you seeing the same kind of trend in your area? And does that make you, despite the fact that you're a Conservative candidate, does that make you somebody who is less party political in the way that you go about the job?
Yeah, really interesting question. The answer is yes. So I think one of the things that people have been attracted to about how I've done the job is I haven't been particularly partisan. I'm a proud Conservative, but I've tried to work across party. And remember, this region is a very politically balanced region, so you have to do that. And I think people have said, first and foremost, I've been a champion for the place, not a servant just for my party. And of course, that's so, so, so important. And that's exactly the purpose of this role, to be a single accountable person who tries to bring people together, because I honestly believe if we work together as a team in the West Midlands, we'll deliver better outcomes.
Andy, it's good to talk to you again. Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Andy Street there, the newly re-elected mayor for the West Midlands. There's so much, really, after all of this, Kirsty, to talk about. You know, the Scottish angle that we were discussing earlier about, you know, the ding-dong, if you like, that we're looking at between Westminster and Edinburgh. There's the pattern of local government in England, which is changing before our very eyes. Andy Burnham and Andy Street have explained that. And there is, of course, the issue in Wales where, you know, they may well demand more devolved powers for the Welsh Parliament. So we really have witnessed, I think, a very, very significant set of elections yesterday and today.
I do think it has been a convulsion, and what's been so interesting is without elections for Westminster and without Westminster being the absolute focus, we've heard from you know, such stellar people around the country. We've heard just there from Andy Street, we've heard from Andy Burnham, we've heard from Nicola Sturgeon, we've heard from Mark Drayford. And I think, you know, I said 48 hours ago when we kicked off that Scotland is a very different country. Well, actually, the vote would say that that difference has actually increased. But when you hear all these voices around you know, England, Wales and Scotland, you realise that there is not a single voice for the UK, and there never will be again. There are strong voices in every area, you know, with the mayors and so forth coming forward. And, you know, I think that no matter what happens, you talk about Wales, no matter what happens in Scotland, we've heard the call from Gordon Brown for this, there will be, going forward, more powers for Scotland in whichever way. I'm sure that will probably be the case in the north, and it will be the case in Wales. So I think what we're seeing is we're seeing a kind of tectonic shift in the UK, and it's almost been refreshing not to be seeing this through the prism of Westminster?
I think we've been very lucky, Kirsty, to be able to co-host a set of elections which really have raised such fundamental questions about, you know, not just what's going on now, but what's likely to happen or what might happen in future. It's been a big thrill, hasn't it?
Been a great thrill, and you know, it's been great. You've been wonderful in that warm studio of yours, and I don't mind the fact you've been warm, you know, because I've got the warmth of the crew around me.
Do you know what, Kirsty? That wasn't necessary at all. It really wasn't. Well, look, can we both, you and I would both agree the crew have done an amazing job, you know, with our editors and directors and technical staff and everyone behind the scenes. It's been a terrific team effort, not just here and in Edinburgh, but actually throughout England, Scotland and Wales. So that's been great. Reeta with us here in the studio, doing a wonderful job. Just a quick thought, Reeta, on what will stay with you after this?
It's very hard to pick one result out. I think, as Kirsty was saying, it's such a jigsaw, isn't it? Such a sort of different results all over the place. It feels unfair to pick something out, other than to say it just does all feel extremely significant. It
does. Vicky, and to you?
I think it's now all about delivery. I mean, this is about areas winning, the people we've seen who are victorious. They have all now got to deliver something for the people who voted for them. And that, of course, as ever, is the biggest challenge.
And to the numbers magician and the great genius who's in our company, John, your final thought on what we take away from this couple of days?
Well, the first law of politics is the law of unintended consequences. And so far as the story of devolution in the UK is concerned, that is a law that is playing out with an effect that would never forecasted 20 years ago. And perhaps is going to have even yet further effects that we would have not possibly have imagined 20 years ago.
Well, I think that's a good, thoughtful, insightful, perceptive, positive note on which to end. John Curtice, thank you very much. From Kirsty and from me and from all of the team, can I just say thank you for watching. And the coverage continues. Of course it does, because the BBC News team goes on 24/7 every day of every year. So we're going to hand over to Anita now to take over and to take you through the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.